Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People it's one of the best-selling books of all time for a pretty simple reason. The stuff in it just works. It is absolutely packed with game-changing insights. And today, we're going to unpack the very first, and you could argue the most important secret to dealing with people.
Now, to really get this secret, we have to start in a kind of strange place with a notorious killer named Two Gun Crowley. So back in 1931, he's trapped in an apartment, totally surrounded by police in this massive shootout. But right in the middle of all this chaos, what does he do? He writes a letter. And what's so wild about this letter is what he said about himself. He literally wrote that he had a kind heart that hurts no one. This is coming from a guy who, just a few hours earlier, had shot and killed a police officer for the simple act of asking for his driver's license.
And believe it or not, Crowley wasn't some isolated case. Think about Al Capone, right? America's most famous gangster. Did he see himself as a ruthless criminal? Not a chance. He honestly saw himself as a public benefactor, someone who was just giving people the lighter pleasures in life, helping them have a good time. And in his mind, his only reward for all this good he was doing was being hunted by the police.
So what is going on here? The fact that both of these men, these hardened criminals, saw themselves as victims, well, it brings us to a really fascinating psychological puzzle. Let's call it the criminal mindset.
How is that even possible? How could people who did such objectively terrible things not see themselves as villains, but as misunderstood, maybe even good people? The warden of the infamous Sing Sing prison once said that very, very few inmates there ever admitted they were bad people. They could rationalize, they could explain away every single thing they did.
And here's the crucial point that just unlocks everything. It's because 99 times out of 100, human beings do not blame themselves for anything, no matter how wrong they might be. Criticism is totally futile because it just puts people on the defensive and forces them to justify themselves. So think about it. If even the most hardened criminals don't blame themselves, what does that tell us about the everyday people in our own lives?
And this insight, it beautifully illustrates the foundation for Dale Carnegie's very first principle for dealing with people. It's a rule that, once you really understand it, it changes everything. The principle is super simple and direct. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. It sounds easy, right? But it goes against our very nature. Our first instinct when someone messes up is so often to point it out, to criticize them for it. So why is criticism so incredibly ineffective? Well, as Carnegie explains, it immediately puts people on the defensive. The second you criticize them, their walls go up. It forces them to protect their ego and justify what they did. It wounds their pride, it creates resentment, and here's the kicker. It almost never leads to any lasting positive change. Sure, it might make us feel better for a second, but it just damages the relationship and solves absolutely nothing.
Now, there is no better example of someone who truly mastered this principle than Abraham Lincoln, but he definitely had to learn it the hard way.
So early in his career, Lincoln was a master of criticism and sarcasm. In 1842, he wrote a letter that mocked a political rival so viciously that the man actually challenged him to a duel to the death. They were stopped at the very last second, but that experience taught Lincoln an invaluable lesson. From that day on, he almost never criticized anyone publicly again. Flash forward to the Civil War, his General Meade fails to capture the retreating enemy army, a mistake that could have ended the war right there. Lincoln was furious and wrote this absolutely scathing letter, but he never sent it.
So why didn't he send it? Because as he stood there, looking out the window of the White House, he put himself in his general's shoes. He thought, it's easy for me to sit here and give orders. But if I had seen all the blood he had just seen, if I had heard the screams of the dying, maybe I wouldn't have been so eager to attack either. In that moment, he chose understanding over condemnation.
Okay, so let's bring this into our own lives. Because when we criticize, our words can be a lot like a ticking bomb.
Think of your anger or your criticism like a can of soda that's just been shaken up like crazy. If you pop it open right away, it just explodes everywhere, right? It makes a huge mess that you can't really clean up. Those are words spoken in the heat of the moment. But if you just let that can sit for a bit, let things calm down, you can open it later and everything comes out in a controlled, useful way. Words spoken in anger, you can never take them back.
I actually learned this one firsthand. I was in a group at work, and a colleague passed by wearing this incredibly strong perfume. Now, I'm just not a fan of that kind of scent, so I made a comment that I thought was harmless, something like, "Excuse me, I need to go wash this off my hands." I really meant nothing personal by it, but my coworker was deeply offended and just embarrassed.
And in that moment, I realized my comment achieved absolutely nothing positive. It didn't change the situation, it just hurt someone's feelings and made everything awkward. It really brings to mind a powerful piece of advice. If the words you are about to speak will bring you zero positive return, just don't say them.
So if we can't criticize, we can't condemn, we can't complain, what's the alternative? I mean, how are we supposed to deal with people's mistakes?
Well, the alternative is to really, truly internalize this one core rule. It's Carnegie's first and most fundamental secret, and it's built on 3 simple actions to avoid. Don't criticize, don't condemn, and don't complain. The alternative is empathy. That's it. Instead of condemning people, try to understand them. Try to figure out why they do what they do, because there's always a reason. And honestly, that's way more profitable and interesting than criticism. It breeds sympathy and tolerance and kindness. You know, there's an old saying, to know all is to forgive all. So I'm going to leave you with this one question to think about. In your own life, with your family, your friends, your coworkers, when was the last time that criticism truly made a situation better in the long run versus all the times it just made things worse? The answer might just change the way you interact with everyone.